Chronicles of Captivity, Chronicle number 15, 13, and 1. Hello everybody, this is the Chronicles of Captivity. This is Chronicle number 15. As you may recall, in Chronicle number 14, we spoke about the first couple of incidents, first couple of weeks really, at Leavenworth and meeting Carl Bowles and getting out of the hole by hook and crook. A few of the other things that happened, a few of the incidents, like the incident in vegetable prep, where one of the food service stewards was put on the floor by this big Hawaiian guy who then grabbed the butcher knife, a long butcher knife, off of the table. They've got like a table on them that chains him to the table, but he tried to get the guy. And then they ran in, his buddies, and essentially stopped him. They didn't stop him, but they sort of talked him down, from what I heard. So, yeah, he ended up getting in trouble, going to the hole, of course, being locked up, transferred. I mean, it was a big event. But things like that happened. It wasn't all the time. It wasn't every minute of every day or anything like that. But they did happen occasionally. There were, like I said, there was a riot. It's all reported in the newspapers, on the news back then. It was a big deal, right? They called it a riot, but it wasn't anything. Really just a disturbance is what I would have called it, where guys are arm wrestling in the auditorium, Big Mark and this big black dude named Tiny. Big Mark breaks his arm. Pandemonium breaks out. The blacks start tearing up their seats. The whites start tearing up their seats, making weapons to protect themselves. Ron Jackson and I scooted up out of there before we got caught up in it too deep. He knew right away. Ron knew. He was smart. He's like, and we sat toward the back anyway, and toward, the close to the exit. So all we had to do was just get up right quick. We got against the wall. We stood there for just a second, seeing what was going on, and then we got out the door before all the guards came to lock the place down. We got back to the unit. We got locked down in the unit, but, that was just a lot more comfortable being locked in your cell during a disturbance or a riot or whatever you want to call it than being locked out on the yard or in the auditorium or chow hall. Because, there was some stuff going on. People were acting out. And again, there was a change in the laws. There was a lot of people getting a lot of time. Things were kind of in a turbulence. And prisoners were sort of, I wouldn't say exactly out of control, but prisoners were getting bad attitudes. They were getting to the point where there was a lot more willingness to engage in disruptive acts and violence and all that kind of stuff. We had guys that were doing silly stuff like, one guy that got naked in the chow hall next to the warden, started talking to him, and the warden just got his arms crossed and just nodding. The guy standing over here on the side of him, stark naked, talking to him. And then the AW next to the warden looked and was like, hey, grab him. So they chased him all over the chow hall. Finally, they got him down and carried him out. But buck-ass naked, they carried him down the hallway to the lieutenant's office. Yeah, it was, it was stuff like that, little stuff. But what they have an old saying in the penitentiary and prisons generally, what makes it good makes it bad. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because the freedoms that we had at that time, they were fairly significant. This is before the laws were passed to restrict prisoners' property. You could have certain little things. You could have hobby craft. You could have a musical instrument. You could have crocheting, knitting materials. You could have hobby craft. You could have this and that. People had radios, big radios, regular regular AM, FM radios, nice ones that they had from other institutions. And, but when all these restrictions started coming in place, it made for a lot of angst and animosity and unrest among the prisoners. So, yeah, and then couple that with the, I don't want to say mismanagement, but it seemed like there was, at that point in time, it seemed like there was a laxity, I guess a lack of understanding on the part of SIS, Special Investigative Services. That's the intelligence arm that operates out of the captain's office, part of custody, but they're kind of autonomous. They have a lot of power. I mean, the warden usually defers to them guys, and they're just lieutenants. They're not even captains, they're just lieutenants. So, but those guys are the ones that make all these deals, and they got everybody's background, everybody's record. They know how to, they've got all the eyes on. They've got all these situations going. And they're behind the scenes, pulling the strings, trying to manipulate those situations so that they can maintain control. But look, what happens if they don't want to maintain control? What happens if they just want things to go haywire? What happens if they're threatened in some kind of way with the loss of their jobs? That's one thing that I saw very clearly back then, was that staff, Bureau of Prison staff, no matter how outrageous the possibility might be of them losing their job, they were absolutely terrified. They were terrified of losing prisoners. They thought that the sentencing guidelines, what they thought was that if this class action lawsuit that I filed challenging the validity of the guidelines, not on a administrative basis, not on separation of powers, but under under the fraud statutes and provisions of federal law, because they did commit this really serious fraud when they created the sentencing guidelines, and it had to do with maximizing sentences when those sentences were supposed to be they were supposed to be within these categories that allowed for the maximum authorized sentence to be capped at a certain amount. In other words, like bank robbery is 20 years under statute, but under the guidelines it was capped at 12 years and 6 months. That was a maximum authorized sentence that was applicable under the guidelines. However, the judges and the prosecutors and the legislature and everybody committed a fraud. They amended a part of that particular provision of law to a technical amendment where they took out the language of what defines the maximum authorized term. That definition was critical. And they took it out under a technical amendment. In other words, it was never challenged. It was not a constructive amendment. It was a technical amendment. So, yeah, there was really problem there, really a problem. So I filed a lawsuit. I got a bunch of guys together. I filed class action. And, the SIS actually called me down there, Lieutenant Pierce. And he said, I've got a copy of this lawsuit that you filed, and I see you've got a number of guys listed on here. He said, you can get in trouble for this. You're going to end up in the SHU for this stuff. And I was like, I don't think so, because this is completely legal activity. It's authorized. There's nothing wrong with this. I'm not breaking any rules. What am I doing? Are you threatening me with a violation of my constitutional rights or what? So he was like, well, what would be the result of this if you won? I said, well, there'd be a hell of a lot of prisoners getting out of prison earlier than they are now because they've been sentenced to too much time. And this is a fraud. This is a fraudulent application. And if the court will just take an honest look at this, these sentencers are going to violate ex post facto, every single one of them, because it was a categorical thing. So yeah, I mean, that was how that was at that point and how they approached me. And how I approached them, quite frankly. But they were terrified of that. So what they did was they started, in my view, looking back at it, I can see how they started to put these pieces into place. They were trying to get me in the crosshairs. They were trying to set up people around me, like this guy by the name of George Cost, K-O-S-T. George went around and tried to get everybody to take these keys that supposedly were remade in Unicor, and they supposedly opened the pipe chase doors in the units. And he was trying to get me to take this stuff off of the yard and carry it back. And I'm like, you got me fucked up, dude. I'm not carrying anything. No, don't even talk to me about any of that stuff, man. I'm going to let it go this time, but next time, man, don't even come around me with that shit, man, because I'm going to have to fucking, I'm going to have to just stay away from you, man. I don't want to talk about any of that, because I already had a feeling, even then, that, they were trying to set me up. But sure enough, he got all these other guys that were so desperate to escape. He got them trying to get into this. He convinced them that there was a tunnel going out and that all they had to do was get over here and get in this drain. They had, just a round cast iron drain cap that lifted off. And he got them to jump on in there, and they all jumped in there, about 4 or 5 of them, and here comes the troops, SIS and the troops all running out to gavel them up and take them to the SHU and transfer them to Marion and elsewhere. So it was all part of a sting, which is what the Special Investigative Services does. It's an intelligence operation. And, they can be pretty ruthless too. So that's what they were doing. They tried to get me hooked up in that. Didn't work. Guys that were around me all the time that would ask, like when Michael Turner asked, he said, man, in the shower one time, he said, have you ever considered escaping? I know you got some time, and I was like, no, my appeals, man, I got to wait on my appeals. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I've got good appeals pending. I'm going to get this reversed. So it was part being naive about the law at the time and the judges, and it was part not wanting to trust other prisoners because, what's stopping the intelligence services from putting somebody up on you somehow to throw something at that, like that at you to see what your response is. And then maybe you're on a recording, maybe they just report you back as a CI, all of a sudden you're in the hole, right? Locked up for 6 months, a year or whatever, and transferred somewhere else, maybe to Marion. So yeah, I didn't want any of that to happen, but they were gunning for me. I knew that just by their attitudes, their looks, the things that were going on around me, they were gunning for me. No doubt about it, in my mind. So I just had to be really on my P's and Q's. Now, Michael Turner, of course, was the real deal. He wasn't bullshitting at all. He, had found a way to get into the basement area of the education department at night. And, he was really slick about this whole thing. He got them to lock it down. And when they locked it, it was just a padlock on the outside of the door. So he got a bar and he just pulled that padlock and the hasp right out of the door. It bent it and shit, but he bent it back and he got it where he could put it up where it looked like it was locked. You know, you could come up and pull on the lock or whatever, and it wouldn't move. So, but he had access to it. So, yeah, about 2 nights later, I think it was, he went down there during the, during the education move. They're going to lock down 8 o'clock. Everybody's got to clear out. He just scooted down there maybe 7:45, 7:30, whatever, 7 on the 7 o'clock move, and just went down the stairs by himself, went in, pulled the thing shut, put everything back in place, and he was golden. He was just in the basement. Everybody else left the building at 8, went back to the blocks. Staff all left out of there. Probably the hacks made around right quick to make sure everything was everything. And boom, they went out and locked the door. He was by himself. No count for about an hour and a half. So his plan is real simple. There's these like slats in the window. They're steel. They're not really security though. He's got that bar. He just pries them out. Boom, boom. Now he can crawl right out, right outside. So he's right there at the corner of the education and A block. A block's got all the bars going up on the outside. He just climbed up the bars. There was nobody in the tower. There's a tower right there. I mean, right there, right in that corner. But they were doing construction, and a big construction at that gate, and that tower evidently was just turned off. There was just nobody there, nobody in it. If there was, he would have been, he would have seen it shot, probably right off the bat. But he climbed up the bars, got way over. He climbed 40 feet. Those walls are 40 feet walls, 40-foot walls. So he climbed way up there, and he had somewhat of a makeshift rope, but it wasn't long enough, to reach from the bars all the way over the wall and all the way down. A lot of times you just misjudge that stuff. I can tell you from experience. You almost kind of phone it in. You think you have enough, and you just have to go with it. And if you have to drop, 20, 30 feet, you drop 20, 30 feet. Even though I wouldn't want to drop from 30 feet. I've dropped from about 22, 25 feet. Yeah, that was high enough. That's a jolting impact when you hit from 20, 22 or 25 feet. It's jolting. But, he didn't have enough rope. He had to let go on the other side of the wall. You hit that place where the ground is at an angle. Boom, there goes your ankle. Now you got to limp away. You got to hobble away. And, you can't. He wanted to make miles. He was a runner. He was every day skinny dude out there just running miles. He wanted to get away. He wanted to put miles. Now he broke his ankle. So he's just got to limp away and hide in a chicken restaurant down the street until he gets caught like 2 weeks later. So, yeah, I couldn't trust anybody and didn't know. I knew enough to know that, there was something going on, but I didn't know how far the administration would go. But in the next Chronicle, I'll let you know more about it. I'll tell you